with Stephen Richy, and he is the founder and executive director of Colibri Forensics. So we're going to be talking about you're a new nonprofit and just kind of entering into the fundraising aspect, right?
Correct. I've got no
Okay.
experience. My appointment as executive director literally consisted of, we took a vote and you lost, congratulations. It's the
All
story
right.
of every promotion I've ever received.
We'll talk through step 2, which is the brand knowledge portion. And the reason for this part of the process is because it'll help you identify who to target for fundraising so that you get fewer no's. I mean, no's will happen no matter what, but at least this makes it less painful, that you feel like you've really approached someone who could be interested instead of just like carpet bombing sort of the fundraising landscape. So
Nice analogy, by the way.
yeah, I know, right? I know. That was okay. Starting with something that I kind of figured out yesterday with the arts organization I was talking to is that it almost helped us to start with number 3 in order to identify who you serve. But I think, and I have a theory that for a service agency like yours, that it's more it works better to go from straight through from 1 through down to 4.
Yeah.
But with an arts organization, we were dealing with, well, am I raising money for an outreach thing? Am I raising money for a performance? Am I raising money for general operating? And that's going to change who you're serving.
Yeah, I was going to say the nice thing about us is ours is pretty straightforward. We're going out looking for a fixed object, and we have an end point that's very well defined versus trying to herd cats.
So step 1, who do you serve? Who does Colibri serve?
Well, the way we basically do it is we wrote it into the bylaws that our main focus is what's called forensic search and recovery. A good example would be the case we're working on right now, which is an airplane that went missing in 1988 in Lake Michigan. The official search in 88, they did their absolute best. And in fact, they kept the people who were with the local police and sheriff's department kept looking for months afterwards, even after the official search was called off. But the limitations of the technology and weather and just the vagrancies of working on the lake, they didn't find anything. So the family was kind of left with this, sorry for your luck, we can't find them. If you want to pay to have a commercial team come out here and find them, you're more than happy to do so. Let us know if you find anything. Well, the problem with that is that unless you happen to be just ridiculously wealthy, you can't afford it. So you wind up with something on the order of, between $5,000 and $25,000 per day for searching.
Wow. To
bring a commercial diving outfit out or a commercial search boat out, depending on who you hire, what they have, so on and so forth. So the searches actually come in. We want to kind of provide that service to families and work with the local agencies to make sure these people get brought home. And it's where the tagline, everybody deserves to come home, came from. The other thing is that there's a lot of, a few years back, they started pushing, they finally loosened the requirements for searching for military missing in action to allow civilian teams to look without getting chewed out by the Defense Department for doing it. The problem is you've got 2 or 3 teams that have actually started doing it, but they all focus on tropical environments that are basically vacation spots. So you have a lot of people that are missing in places like Nepal, northern India, Canada, the Great Lakes, northern Europe, that do not get any attention because it's not Vietnam, it's not the South Pacific, it's not whatever. And so that, and there's also, a lot of countries have missing in action and they don't have the resources or the time or the manpower to go after theirs. And my attitude is that based on the way I was raised was that how you treat the missing, how you treat the dead is a reflection on your character, not on theirs. So even if they were the enemy during the time of the conflict, you have to go after them. And we specifically, I literally threatened to quit if they didn't approve it into the bylaws, was that you have that the country they served has absolutely no bearing and can have no bearing. Simply for that reason. So that's who we serve. We also do research related to it. We do a few other things here and there, but that's our reason for existence, so to speak, as far as the big thrust goes.
So you serve families who've lost someone who are not independently wealthy and could afford to hire their own.
We'll serve anybody that needs us.
Okay.
We don't care. It's the other point that I need to bring up. Why everybody goes, well, why don't you just have the local dive team do this? Well, one thing, most local dive teams don't have the equipment to do this. They're still operating by what I like to refer to as the grope and grab method of searching. They put a group of divers on the bottom, they string a line across, and they swim until they either swim into something or they feel it.
Sorry,
the local dive teams also tend to be your water rescue teams. They're your fire department, your police department, your state troopers, your game wardens. And so I always pointed out this way is, okay, so we have a cold case that's 30 years old and your dive team's out doing it. What happens if that happens to be the day that they get their call for your kid going into the creek on the other side of the county? They have to pull all their gear out, get their divers out, refill their air tanks, get everybody off site, and get to where the emergency is. You're looking at 30 to 45 minutes on the short end of that.
Wow.
It's much better to have a specifically qualified forensics team who does nothing but that, who can be called in and go, okay, we've got this. You guys can take care of your live people. And we're not interfering with the ability to do that. And I've been on a dive recovery call and had a surface water rescue come up. And that's the worst feeling in the world because you're already behind the curve with the water rescue to begin with most of the time. Yeah. So I don't want to put somebody in that situation, and I don't want it to reflect badly on my brother and sister firefighters or police officers to have a recovery call keep somebody from being saved.
Okay. So you actually serve two sort of different constituencies. Number one, the families who've lost someone and don't have the money to fund their own search and rescue, and two, you serve local agencies that would otherwise have to put their active duty people onto a search and rescue effort that doesn't necessarily help anyone currently living except the families of the lost.
Pretty much. We're a resource. It's already to be a resource for anybody that needs us. Yeah.
But like, you're not a resource for example, me, I haven't lost anyone. You know what I mean? So I'm not your target market in terms of, but I know who to call if that ever does happen. Yeah. And now let's talk about, you've touched on it a bit, but question number 2 is, why do you serve them? And obviously one is financial, that you serve because your tagline, everyone deserves to come home. And then you could add to that, regardless of financial state, regardless of political affiliation, national affiliation, everyone. Right. Let's move on to number 3. What are you raising money for, and what's the goal amount?
Well, goal amount, we're not real sure on that because we're actually working on our fundraising plan for next year right now. So it's kind of we're trying to figure out what we need. What we're raising money for is largely get our own boat, our own sonar, tow fish, and the other equipment we need, and also to train more people because, right now our little group of, I think we have 15, 16 volunteers off the top of my head, and not everybody's available all the time. And that's one of the things that hinders us from going out more often on the search we've had, is that you have to wait for the weather to be good enough, because sonar scanning, you can only do it in waves that are less than a foot to 2 feet high. And well, Lake Michigan doesn't exactly cooperate very often.
Yeah.
So having people around and having our own equipment, hey, weather's calm, let's go.
Yeah.
On a related topic, one of the things that has come out, there's actually a group out of Michigan that gave me the idea, a high school,
Mm.
to use this as a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math
Oh,
education
yeah.
project for students. And, it was one of those, get these kids interested in math, get them interested in engineering, or at least teach them a skill that they can use
Mm-hmm.
to build, electronics, robotics, programming, composites, all the stuff that goes into a search equipment we could use could benefit there. So we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of trying to figure out the funding on that end. We're trying to figure out the funding for the search team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of open-ended. The search that we're on right now, the budget was $4,000 to take the entire search because
Oh my
everything
God.
had been donated. Yeah, versus $5,000 to $25,000 a day.
Yeah. Oh my
Um,
God. So,
the
so you're raising money for, I got sort of three categories: equipment and training. I kind of lumped into one.
right,
STEM education opportunity, like an outreach effort,
right,
but that's like on the back burner, and then
yeah,
general operating.
yeah. Those are our three big things.
Well,
But
let's take the equipment and training, because it's a little bit easier to raise money for like an object. Like, people get excited about buying a thing,
oh yeah,
you
it's a
know,
lot easier to buy an ROV than it is to say, hey, by the way, you're paying for my
internet.
digital.
Yeah, yeah, my insurance. Yeah. So when we look at equipment and training and what you're able to do with it. Moving on to question 4, who benefits when the people I serve are doing well? And this is the question that I think takes it from just sort of general, oh, we serve these people and we help them, and we need to raise money so we can do that, to really targeting who's going to benefit from you doing your job well because you've helped these families. If we think about, who benefits when the people you serve are doing well, you're serving these families who've lost someone. So when you find that person, they're going to need funeral services. I mean, not to be crass, but
No,
that
it's
industry would be an industry to approach. I mean, you already did for an in-kind, but I wonder if there might be, some sort of larger company that might help fund your efforts.
well, we happen to have right down the road. I'm based here in Indianapolis. If you go down 74 towards Cincinnati, there's Batesville, Indiana, which is the largest casket manufacturer in the US.
Oh, there we go.
Batesville might actually be a good partner with us in an odd way because of the fact that their delivery trucks. If you ever see one of their trucks, it has a tree on the back of it, and it says Batesville Casket Company, and it says, "Please drive safely. We don't want your business now."
That's good.
Or yet, I think is how they put it. But
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So yeah, a casket company would be, or an urn manufacturer.
yeah,
Would also be another one. And then I'm also thinking police and fire departments. I know like civic budgets can be really tight, but I wonder if there's a larger association.
well, there's
Like
the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, is one.
mm-hmm.
And with firefighters, there's International Association of Firefighters, which is the paid firefighters union.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of volunteer fire organizations like that, things along those lines.
I wonder also, I'm thinking about attorneys, like particularly estate attorneys.
Yeah, I know a couple of them from. It's oddly because my
Mm-hmm.
Julie's a law student, so yeah.
Yeah. So that might be another sort of category of person to go for. I mean, because or someone who does sort of like, I don't mean to be like ambulance chasey, but that sort of like wrongful death sort of.
Yeah, aviation attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yeah.
happens. It happens.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of those guys are not necessarily ambulance chasers because most of them. In fact, one of the guys in the field survived a plane crash himself, or near plane crash himself.
Wow.
The United Airlines 747 that had the side of the plane peel off in flight.
Oh my
Due to the
God.
cargo door failing. He was
Wow.
taking a break and going on a vacation to relax, and the plane almost crashed into the Pacific because of the damage to the engines and the loss of pressure. But yeah,
Yeah. Oh my God. So yeah, attorneys might be
yeah,
might be. And then I was also thinking about, because as your organization grows, um, the equipment manufacturers, but
yeah.
not just the equipment manufacturers, but also like the fuel suppliers or the like the oxygen suppliers. Um,
Local
you know,
dive shops are what we usually go for
but
dive.
they don't necessarily have a big budget. Like if you're looking
Well,
for a,
the tanks and
ultimately
stuff we can get
$1 million
from
budget.
we can go after we can go after the manufacturers for the physical equipment. An air fill, for one, we don't dive with oxygen.
Mm.
If you dive with oxygen, you'll fry your brain. It literally, oxygen under pressure will it goes after myelin, the coating on the
Oh,
nerves,
okay.
and it'll
Well
literally
then,
cause neurological problems. Yeah,
we don't want
you can
that.
go
But
up to
whatever the air
40%
is.
oxygen. You can go up to 40% oxygen while diving. It's called
Uh-huh.
nitrox.
Mhm.
It reduces the nitrogen is toxic under pressure. Oxygen is toxic under pressure because it builds up in the tissues. Um,
Mm.
you can put certain amounts of oxygen on there to push some of the nitrogen out. But what you do is you go to a local dive shop and say, hey, we have the tanks, it's $15 for an air fill, but we need, 40 bottles filled for this
Mhm.
search and recovery mission.
Mhm.
Can you just fill them for us? And most of the
Mhm.
time they'll do it, or they'll do it for a very minimum cost.
Yeah.
The local dive shop here for the search we're doing right now gives us a 40% discount off of rental equipment and air fills and all that.
But what I'm
So
saying, think bigger, because those dive shops don't have like $1,000 they could just donate to you.
yeah,
But the company that supplies the dive shop, so the dive shop does well when you do well. But
yeah,
who does well off the dive shop? They're usually the ones with the money.
yeah.
So
You go to Mare and
yeah, so
Aqualung and all those guys. Yeah,
exactly. So
we've thought about that for doing the equipment, but on the dive shop end of it, because the sense of community among divers,
Mhm.
um, we've thought about actually doing it as having the local dive shops help us organize, like, more or less a change drive,
Mhm.
um, and stuff like that because of
Mhm.
having that end of it. But for a lot of this
Yeah,
stuff, it doesn't require
grassroots.
for equipment and supplies.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, compressed air is a big supply for us, so
Yeah.
it's having to get into uh, that end of it, and we've kind of racked our brains. Like I said, it's really funny. We've got a bunch of scientists and
Mm.
emergency personnel, and not a one of us has any. Well, one of us has experience working with Kiwanis, but the rest of us are all rank amateurs at this, and we're like,
Yeah.
wait, what? It took me the longest time to get over the fear of actually asking people and realizing I'm not asking them for money. I'm asking them to do something.
Yeah.
Um,
At a
I'm
time
not,
when a
I'm
lot
not,
of people feel helpless, like if a plane goes down and I know the family who's lost someone, I feel completely helpless. I have nothing to offer to
yeah,
solve that, and you do. And
yeah,
you're offering a service to, for example, a fire department or a police department that maybe it's their friend or their,
yeah. I've
they
lost,
suffered a loss too, and you're providing that service for them, and so they I think would be happy to help fund that.
yeah. And a lot of times it's probably not going to be the department. It's going to be the individual officers or firefighters or whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, we actually, one of our larger donors is a retired FBI agent.
Mm.
He is an aviation junkie like I am,
Hmm.
and he was actually our first donor of, well, what we would call a major donor, $500.
Hmm.
And his, I actually literally had to sit down when he donated that because it's like, oh my God, people actually want to help. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's one thing to have a crazy idea. It's another one to make other people realize. It may help make you realize it's not as crazy as it sounds.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
So yeah.
when you mention aviation junkie, that made me think there are, like, my dad is a retiree from McDonnell Douglas slash
Oh,
Boeing,
yeah.
and there's a group of former aviation workers, retirees,
Yeah.
get together in the Fort Worth area, and they restore planes.
Yep.
And
I
so,
volunteered that there's a B-17 being put back together over in Ohio that I've gone over and helped with. Because
okay, so
yeah,
maybe
oh,
those
trust me, it's
groups,
airplane geeks. I always tell
yeah,
people, if you ever want to see proof that partisan politics can be set aside if you have a shared mission, just go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the air show in July,
yeah,
and go to the bar of an evening. You will see some of the most liberal people on the planet sitting with Tea Party Republicans and having an absolutely civil conversation. And the rule is that if you bring up politics, you have to buy the next round for everybody that's there. And
nice.
so you get these senators who are big name, you know,
Hmm.
conservative, and they're just some of the most. They're once you get them away from their job, they're some of the easiest going, most generous people on the planet. And it's. I always tell people that the more you look at people as human beings, and the less you look at them as being an enemy, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
You've got something in common with everybody. I don't care how much you hate them.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
bars are the most democratic of all. Bars and emergency rooms and funeral homes are the most democratic of all institutions. Sooner or later, pretty much everybody shows up, especially funeral homes.
Yeah.
And grief is one of those great equalizers. There's no matter what you do. When I first started, I had a hard time. I came from an emergency medicine background. I burned out because I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was burning me out.
Hmm.
And my boss, I couldn't exactly figure out why people would put the effort into funerals that they did. And he looks and goes, "You do realize that grief is not grief like people think it is. Grief is a form of love. It's unrequited love. It's like you ever
Oh,
pined after somebody who doesn't have any interest in you." He goes, "That's exactly the
oh,
same thing, only a different scenario." He goes, "It's not loss, because if you don't care about somebody, you can't have a sense of loss, and therefore you can't grieve. So grief is love that can never be returned." It's
mm,
also basically the exact same thing that drives a lot of people in the public benefit sector. It's, you know, we're striving to fix something that we see as a problem, but we're also doing it because the fact that there's something in us that we need to have taken care of, and we're trying to do something positive with a negative in our life.
hmm.
I've lost more people than I can count in medical helicopter crashes and small plane crashes, and I don't want anybody else to go through the same experience I did. And if
Hmm.
they do, I want to be there and be able to help them. And so that's kind of why we're here. And it snowballs into all sorts of other emotions. And I'll be quiet so we can get back on track.
That's okay.
But when
No,
it
I
comes
think
to
it's
benefitting,
important.
this is where we have our niche.
Yeah. Well, I think we've identified a couple, at least two or three specific industries, and then you were able to identify even a business that would be likely to fund you, I think.
Right. Yeah, because I mean Batesville Casket, I mean they're extremely community oriented. So
Well, so let me just recap really quick, looking at this whole thing. Number one, you serve families who can't afford search and rescue, military families, and local agencies that don't want to commit their on-duty personnel or can't commit their on-duty personnel to search and rescue. Number
mm,
two, you serve them because everyone deserves to come home. Number three, you are raising money for equipment and training, general operating funds, and perhaps one day a STEM educational outreach opportunity.
yeah.
That one, I would go through this process and look at that one too, because that is something that is easy for someone to connect to, a business to connect to.
Like one of our projects, talking to one of the students about, he's like, I have he has an interest in computer programming.
Mm-hmm.
The school doesn't have any option for him to learn how to do that. And I made a comment. I said, "Oh, you want to help design an autonomous underwater vehicle? It's a computer program. It's basically you program it to run a certain depth and stay off the bottom. And
Oh, cool.
it can run for 12, 14, 15, 18, 20 days and scan an entire area."
Step 4, who benefits when the people you serve are doing well? We've identified funeral homes and casket manufacturers, the police and fire departments, but the larger, maybe like national organizations of those, certain types of attorneys, and the air suppliers, compressed air suppliers, not necessarily the small dive shops, but then we
also need just the equipment dive equipment manufacturers.
Equipment manufacturers, right? Because as you grow, you're going to need more equipment, and they're going to, as this becomes a thing, then then we identified maybe for more grassroots fundraising, the dive shops and aviation junkies who would be interested in personally, like, here's $50 for your crowdfunding effort, so you can buy a thing. I love going through this process. I hope that it's been
really
illuminating and okay, great. And now you also have the whole workbook. So, feel free to just post in our group. For those of you watching who aren't me and Steven, we have a Facebook group of nonprofit leaders, and you are vetted. Everyone in the group is vetted to make sure that you are leading a nonprofit or arts organization, because not all arts organizations are nonprofits, but they have a special place in my heart. So, and Steven's too. So, so you can look us up on Facebook. It's called Executive Director Mastermind, and we are here to help you with your thorny nonprofit issues.